Today, we'll be looking at the teleological argument, or the fine-tuning argument. Now, of all theistic arguments, this one has the strongest basis in real evidence, physics. In physics, the fine-tuning is a real thing. It is a real phenomenon that actually exists. But is it evidence of the existence of a God? Well, let's find out.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere.
So this is a common conflation theists make when addressing the fine-tuning of the universe. They say that if any changes are made to the known forces, well, then no life is even philosophically possible in the universe, and that's false. So even if we assume that life can only be physical and has to be governed by the laws of physics, there could still be more laws of physics that we haven't discovered yet. And so if we dial down, let's say, the law of gravity, that law, however much we dial it down, could be replaced by a different law that we just haven't discovered yet. And so any changes to the known laws could affect these undiscovered laws and create a proportional shift so that the things we see in the universe are still going to occur. We're still going to have particles and planets and life. They're just governed by the current law that's been changed plus this new law that we haven't changed. So just changing laws of physics would not prevent any life occurring in the universe. That's false. It would just prevent any known kind of life if we assume these are literally all the physics that exist and there's nothing we haven't discovered yet. And then we change the laws, then no life would be possible. But that has this massive assumption there that there's literally no other physics that we haven't discovered yet out there in the universe. That's the only way this could be possible. It's the only way this argument could work is if we've discovered literally everything about physics and there's nothing that we haven't discovered yet that could replace the known stuff, and then we change the known stuff, then life would be impossible because we wouldn't be able to have particles or whatever. But the theists don't normally mention this in their argument, that they're kind of hinged on this one criterion, that we've discovered everything about physics for this sentence to be true, which is clearly stupid.
Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. Gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments. The universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life.
Another assumption baked into this argument is that there can't be an unknown part of physics that causes all the known physics to be entwined or entangled. It could be the case that any change to any one of the laws will cause a proportional change to all of the other laws. And so no matter how you change one thing like gravity, it will cause a proportional change to all the others because there is some unknown law that we haven't discovered yet, which is entangling them all. And so any change in one will cause a proportional change in the others, kind of like a Hoberman sphere. So this argument assumes that each of the laws are independent and they're not connected to one another. And if that's the case, so if again, there's literally nothing else out there that we haven't discovered yet which could cause them to be intertangled, and they are each and every one of them are independent forces and you can change them to make them disproportionate to all the others, well, then life isn't possible. So again, this argument is wholly contingent on the assumption that we know all of physics and that all there is just the known physics.
Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant, a change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge.
Now, ignoring all of the ridiculous theistic assumptions baked into this argument, if we're just looking at known physics and the known physical laws and we don't make any assumptions about what else could be there, if we could change any of the current laws and make them slightly disproportionate to the other laws, then yes, that would prevent all of the known particles from forming, so we wouldn't be able to have stars or planets or life given the known physics. And we do want to know what is causing this. What is the best explanation of why the laws have this particular pattern, this particular symmetry to them that makes it that they have the correct relationship to be able to produce a universe with life? That is a valid question. So this fine-tuning is a real phenomenon, and it is something that we want to be able to answer in physics. So the question is, what's the best explanation?
What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design.
Design is a kind of necessity. If something was designed, then it couldn't have been otherwise than the way in which it was designed. The question would then be, was the designer a result of chance or necessity? So design isn't a third option here. It's just silly that theists present this as a third option.
Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe.
Now there's a trick here that theists are using when they're saying possible and necessity and impossible. They mean logical possibility. Logical possibility just means there's no logical contradiction in the statement X. So there's no logical contradiction in the statement. We can turn each of the dials of the laws of physics independently a little bit. Yes, that's possible. And if we do that, there's more ways you can turn it than the particular setting that it's on right now. Like, obviously, yes, there are clearly more logically possible ways to turn the dials than the way they are currently set. Surprise. However, this argument applies to their God as well. This is something they don't normally realize for unknown reasons. There's more ways to change the possible ways a God could be than the particular Christian God. So, for example, it's possible that a God could exist who wouldn't drown millions of babies in the global flood. That's a possibility. It's possible a God could exist who wouldn't sacrifice his son to himself for himself because of his mistakes. Also possible. Possible there was no God who would create an apple in a garden full of people that he knew they would eat. Possible? Yeah. So there's equally as many possible variations of a God as there are variations of a universe. In fact, we could take this to another level. We could say there is equally as many types of gods as there are types of universes. For example, you could say it's logically possible that there is a God who would want universe type X. So like say a universe with nothing but unicorns. There is a possible God who could want a universe with nothing but unicorns. There is a possible God who would want a universe with nothing but hydrogen atoms. There's a possible God who could want nothing but a universe of black holes. So for each of those dials, that it's logically possible that we could change the scales of the universe in any way, there's also a God that it's logically possible could exist to want that kind of a universe. Now, this causes a problem for theists because now, just as the universe is fine-tuned and has a very particular dial setting to it to make a universe life-permitting, God must also have fine-tuning, because the way a God must be would have to be such a way to create a universe with these dials to produce a life-permitting universe. So there's just as many gods who may not want a life-permitting universe as there are universes that would not produce life. And so God has the exact same fine-tuning problem as the universe. And we must ask the same question. What best explains this? Is it chance or necessity? Or design? Now, technically, there's infinitely more variations of a god than there are variations of the known laws of physics. So the fine-tuning problem for a god would be significantly worse than the fine-tuning of the universe. Because, for example, you could have a god who wanted an extra law of physics, who just adds a new law of physics in there. And so the question would become, well, why did God create this universe with these laws and no extra laws at exactly these dials, as opposed to changing this dial to one notch to the left, or to adding an extra dial, and then a new God who added the extra dial and moved that one notch to the left. So there's infinitely many more gods that could exist than there are possible universes. And so this problem that the theists are presenting of the fine-tuning is actually significantly worse for their God than it is for the universe. But let's ignore that for the sake of the argument. Let's just imagine that they're about 1-to-1, just to make it simpler for the theists.
How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance.
Technically, the speaker here is correct when he says that there's no evidence that the fine-tuning is a result of necessity. Now, even though I mentioned earlier, it is possible that all of the laws are interconnected in such a way that a change to one will cause proportional changes to the other. So it's possible it's a result of necessity. There's no empirical evidence that such a thing exists, because there's no evidence of anything causing the fine-tuning. We don't know. We have no idea what caused the fine-tuning. Could be chance, could be necessity, could be design, or sort of. But there's no evidence for anything that caused it, which means there's no evidence of a god causing it. So I don't know why he's bringing this up, because this isn't a disparity between any of the hypotheses. None of them have evidence. None of them. And so when we're asking which is the best explanation of the fine-tuning, we don't care about evidence yet. We're just assessing which is the best hypothetical in this case to try and explain the data. So this is kind of a sneaky way to try to disparage the naturalistic hypothesis without actually saying anything, because guess what? God has no evidence either. Now remember, as I mentioned earlier, there's infinitely many more ways a God could be than there are ways the universe could be, and so the God is significantly more finely tuned than the universe is. So this problem would apply significantly more to the God hypothesis than to the naturalistic hypotheses, and so it shows that the theistic hypothesis is significantly worse than the naturalistic hypotheses, because it would have to answer the same question: why is the God so perfectly fine-tuned? Did it happen by chance, necessity, or was it designed by something else? Well, we'll address that later.
So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse.
Gone beyond empirical science? Oh, you mean like the God hypothesis? Is God empirical science? No. You have no empirical evidence of God, so you've also gone beyond the empirical science, making up a God hypothesis. I mean, come on, hello, this applies to your hypothesis too. I don't know why you're saying this as if it's some kind of an attack to show that the naturalistic hypothesis is bad, because yours is just as bad.
They imagine...
Imagination.
They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning.
Oh God! Like, does he not see it? I don't think he sees it. It's like, come on, man, come on. So you imagine a hypothesis that has no scientific evidence, can't be detected, observed, measured, or proved. What is that? Does that sound a bit like a god? Just teensy bit? Now, there is one fundamental difference here between the God hypothesis and the multiverse hypothesis. Every part of the multiverse hypothesis has an empirical basis. All of the parts have been demonstrated to be real and not just imaginary. So, for example, the multiverse is a combination of Guth's early universe inflation, which was observed in patterns in the cosmic microwave background, and vacuum states and particle energy, which was observed in the Casimir effect. So both of the parts that are used to build the multiverse hypothesis have an empirical basis. But none of the parts of a god have an empirical basis. Have we ever demonstrated omnipotence, omniscience, infinite power, eternality? No. Perfect goodness? No. So all of the parts of a god are completely made up and imagined with no basis in reality, whereas all of the parts of the multiverse theory have an empirical basis and have been demonstrated to exist, independent of our imagination. So when comparing which hypothesis is a better explanation of the data, the one which all of its parts have been demonstrated is always going to be better than the one who adds even a single part that hasn't been demonstrated. And God adds infinitely many parts that haven't been demonstrated. So clearly the multiverse, even though the collection hasn't been demonstrated to be true, because all of the parts have been, it's a better hypothesis than the God hypothesis. For example, if we see a footprint in the snow, to say it was caused by a horse, a rabbit, a deer, and a bunch of other known things would be better than to say the footprint was caused by a unicorn. So the hypothesis which only uses combinations of things that have an empirical basis is always a better hypothesis than the hypothesis that adds in things that have no empirical basis.
Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way.
Again, design isn't a third option. Design is just necessity. So if the universe was designed, the question is who fine-tuned the fine-tuner? Was the fine-tuner a result of chance or necessity? Design isn't a third option here.
A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
The fundamental mistake that Hoyle and Davies and that most theists make in this argument is that the numbers don't tell us anything. It's like, imagine if we have a dice with 1,000,000 sides and there's one red side, and we just find this dice on a table and the red side is the one pointed up. Like, obviously this would be really strange. We wouldn't expect to find a dice with 1,000,000 sides and just one red one, and that one red one to be the one that's pointing up. But this doesn't tell us what did that. Maybe the dice is weighted. Maybe there's a weight hidden in the dice that we don't know about, and that forces it to land on the red side every single time, and there's no difference. Maybe it just happened to get blown by the wind and just land on it by that way. Or maybe there's some person who just really likes the color red and causes the dice to be placed in that position. All three of these are possibilities. But just the fact the dice is on the red side doesn't tell us one way or the other. The numbers themselves aren't evidence of design. The only way that this would actually count as evidence of a designer is if we already had proved a designer existed by some other means. And then once we know this other designer, Bob, exists and he has some kind of particular nature to him that makes him likely to make the kind of universe we see, and then we discover our universe, then it's reasonable to infer, oh yeah, Bob made it, clearly. But if we don't have evidence of Bob, if we haven't proved Bob exists independently, then just seeing the universe isn't evidence of Bob. But don't take my word for it. Let's talk to one of the world's leading expert theists on the fine-tuning problem, Professor Robin Collins, who I had on my channel. It's fair to say that if you don't include the philosophical argument, that you just go based off of the physics, like combinations of principles, particles, laws in the field of physics, that doesn't support design at all. It's only supported when you add the philosophical argument of like morality to the physics.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think the fine-tuning supports a generic design hypothesis. They're just some designer. I think if you just say some designer, that gives you no reason to think the designer would produce this kind of universes versus all others. Just like any improbable event, if you allow that, then any improbable event you could have supporting a design hypothesis. So no, I don't think that will work. I think you have to have a reason that's somehow out of the and not just simply ascribed to the nature, that comes out of something deeper in the nature of your postulate.
Thanks, guys, for stopping by. I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. If you have any suggestions on what videos and arguments you want me to see me debunk, please put them in the comments below or on my Discord on the Vid You Like Debunk section. Shout out to Don Fullman of the Skeptics of Middle Georgia for sponsoring the channel as always. Great guy. Check out the Skeptics of Middle Georgia. Link in the description. Also, I always got my merch. Got my cup. Nice cup with my logo and my chair on it. And check out my shirts. My cool shirts. I really like that one's a really nice one. I bought one for myself just because I like it that much. But yeah. Thanks again for stopping by. Really appreciate it. Let me know what videos you want to see me debunk next, and I will see you for the next one. Peace out. Oh God! Like, does he not see it? I don't think he sees it.